Hi, I'm KS Garner, and you're listening to the Solo Nerd Podcast. Today, I'll be speaking with comics writer and creator of the ID-10T era comic series, Matt McGrath, here to promote the Kickstarter for his second issue. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us and thank you for reaching out. But outside my introduction, who is Matt McGrath in his own words?
Matt McGrath is a comic writer by evening and a content marketing specialist by day. That's my day job. I work at in the marketing department of a big Canadian university. So ID-10T Error is kind of my first solo outing in self-publishing. So in September 2020, I successfully funded the first issue, and that was a digital only issue. So for this Kickstarter, which is running now for issue 2, I'm also kind of going back and funding a print run of issue 1. So if you're interested, you can get issue 1 and issue 2 print for the first time. Other than that, I've been published in comic anthologies over the years. So kind of most notably was looking at my desk here, reading them. Called Into Being. That was a Frankenstein zine that was celebrating his novel's 250th anniversary. And I was also published in Gothic Tales of Haunted Futures by Renegade Arts Entertainment, which was kind of Gothic tales with like a sci-fi romantic twist to them. And that was published a couple years ago. So yeah, like I said, this is my first, second solo outing, first series solo outing.
Okay, so what is ID-10T era about?
Right. So the pitch I give to people is it's about a man named Bradley who creates the most, sophisticated AI robot in his basement, just using kind of junk that he finds in his basement or like in trash cans around the city. And when he manages to create this AI, this completely sentient being, he doesn't do it because he wants to better mankind or make millions and millions and billions of dollars off this revolutionary technology. He does it just because he wants to immediately torture and kill this thing that he's created. So, of course, what he doesn't really account for is when his robot gains sentience, it's not really into that plan. So it immediately tries to outwit Bradley, the man that created him, and escape him and try and survive as best that it can. So, it's kind of like a cat and mouse game from there on out where, Bradley gets the upper hand and the AI gets the upper hand. And it sounds really weird and creepy, and it is, but it's also meant to be a comedy. Like, it's very silly and over the top, and yeah. So that was a concept for the first issue, and then for the second issue, without spoiling it too much, it takes place right after the first issue. So the AI has escaped Bradley's captivity, and it's escaped into the streets of Toronto, which I'm from Toronto, so I thought, hey, might as well make it set place in Toronto. So from there, they're kind of this weird vendetta, this cat and mouse game between these two beings spills into the streets of Toronto, and just mayhem and chaos ensues from there.
Yeah, when I read it, like the first couple of pages did kind of creep me out a bit. I was like, did he actually do it out of a real person at first? But then obviously he I don't want to spoil it too much for new readers, but he kind of goes into his villain monologue a bit about how the robot was created and why it was created. And I've had things crash before, and like stuff, months and months of things completely gone. I'm not into coding or anything like that. I think that's just way over my head. But I've had projects like crash, and I'm just like, just desperate for an answer or for a solution. I mean, people haven't abandoned me for it or anything like that. But when your whole life, what you feel like is your whole life, is completely gone, like, what do you do? How do you pick up the pieces? And for Bradley, obviously, it's revenge, some sort of warped version of revenge that he wants against something that he created just so he could destroy it, which is it is weird in a way. So kind of really is over the top as far as you can go. And it's also a thing about like morality in a way. I don't know if it's something you thought about. It's like, is it really murder? Because when I still thought it was a person, and I'm like, yeah, someone's gonna come looking for him, but then when he goes and explaining how he actually created this AI, I'm thinking he kills it. Is it really murder in a way? Is it because this AI is sentient in a way that he created, but it's not an actual person too? Yeah. So how does that work? Maybe that's what Bradley was thinking. Oh, it's not really real, so it doesn't really mean anything. But you made it real in a way. So how does that work?
Yeah, I think like for him, the fact that it's real, he thinks it's real. It's a sentient being with personality, and that's where he kind of gets like that's where the revenge comes in. That's where he gets this kind of sense of like, I don't know, closure and justice, because he kind of imbued this thing with life. And that's, like, okay, let's just spoil it. It's okay. So Bradley in college, his laptop crashes, and like he's working on a big project, and it totally craps out. Everybody that was working on the project with him is kind of at a loss because everything's done. He fails the course, blah blah blah. Like it's kind of this crucial point in his life where he thinks everything goes wrong because his laptop just crapped out on him. So yeah, from there on out, he just gets obsessed. Like he has no outlet to vent his rage because he, yelling at just an inanimate object isn't satisfying for him. So that's where the mission of like giving this thing life comes in. He's just so he can kind of get that release out, that emotional release out on this thing and get that revenge. So yeah, I think that's what makes him like a really bad person. That's what makes him the villain. He creates life just to kill it. So he does create something sentient and real with feeling, and that's the point, because he wants to take that life away. Because I don't know, that's what revenge is, right? And we want to ruin somebody else's life because they ruined our life. Yeah. So that's it's pretty. It's a weird thing to do. It's a weird that's what makes Bradley's story like him the villain, and also so tragic, because he's just a guy that's wasted his life on this meaningless pursuit of revenge. So yeah, that's what I think makes him a compelling and interesting character, and also frustrating and awful as well.
So could you elaborate on your creative process on ID-10T era as a whole? So just from it being a thought in your head to working on as a complete work, and then finding collaborators to work with, to now promoting the first and pretty much the second issue as well.
Yeah. So surprise, surprise, the idea came from an experience where my laptop crashed and I lost everything. So that's where it started. It's been an idea in my head since college. So back in university, gross. In university, I was really into film and directing. So it originally started as like a short film idea. And then from there, I kind of thought maybe I'd make it into a play, like a one-act play. There's a theater festival in Toronto called Fringe Festival. It's it's in the States too. It's like all over the world, anyways. So it's like maybe I'll make it like into a fringe play and do it that way. And that didn't work out. And eventually, like 10 years later, I just finally settled like, I'll make it into a comic. So that kind of took off. And from there, wrote the script during my lunch at work. And then assembling the team. Ottavio I found on Reddit. There's a subreddit there for collaboration. So as soon as I saw his work, I was like, yeah, this is the guy for the job. He does very kind of like a mix of cartoonish and realistic. Like it's got like a realistic look to it, but in the samples that I saw him do, he would have like his realistic story or like the realistic images of a person, and then suddenly in one panel when there's like an extreme reaction, like the dude had like these gigantic bug eyes or something. So I kind of wanted that style for it. Like I said, I think it's a comedy, but it's not really. There's not that many jokes in it per se. It's all about the situation and just the absurdity of Bradley's weird mission.
Yeah, I think the reactions is what makes it funny in a
Yeah,
way. And you describe it as more like a cat and mouse, Tom and Jerry type of thing. So that I think how it's portrayed on the page really gives it that as well. And I liked how I guess you're getting into the lettering with your letterer, but I like how the lettering isn't like bubbles like this per I guess panel is kind of just goes along the page in a way, which I really like. I'm not really a big comics person. I'm more of like in the graphic novels, but I've never really seen a comic like this before, which I really enjoyed.
Thanks.
But
Hey, by
yeah,
the way,
go ahead.
issue here, I did a print test run, so this is what it looks like, the first issue. It's actually larger than your average comic.
Yeah.
So here's like an average comic, and then here's ID-10T against it. So you're getting like a bigger piece of work for the money.
Yeah, I think bigger actually works because of how detailed it is and the colors in a way. I feel like if you were smaller, it would compress all that down, which would it kind of would lose its integrity. And again, how everything is laid out, it kind of has to be taller or larger, I should say, in a way, for it to maintain its integrity.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Thanks for pointing it out. That's Ottavio, like his cartooning really sells the comedy of it. Those Tom and Jerry, that's a good example. I always think like Bugs Bunny kind of Looney Tunes reactions. Bradley like suddenly becomes like a cartoon character with his eyes popping out or something like that. So not a lot of jokey jokes. It's very weird, but that the illustration really sells the comedy and absurdity of it.
Yeah.
Ottavio, Kate found him on Reddit. Kay Baird, who colors the comic. I just found her on Twitter. I literally just went into Twitter and typed in colorist, and I think her work was, one of the first ones that I found, and instantly, like, it captivated me. Kay is like an amazing illustrator in her own right. She's the illustrator on a graphic novel called A Guardian with Easton Taverna, which was funded on Kickstarter, kind of around the time that I did the Kickstarter for issue 1 of this series. One of the most consistent compliments I get about the book is the color scheme in the basement, which is those really bright blacks, that red, and those blues, and that's kind of the monochromatic color scheme. So as much as I think Ottavio sells the comedy of the book, Kay with her colors, that template really sells the kind of horror aspect of it. It makes it really super creepy to kind of be in that basement with the AI. And whenever something really violent happens, you see those like big reds suddenly come to the scene, and that kind of dominates the scene. When things are a little more calmer, then we get those like blue colors that kind of go throughout. Cool thing is, like I mentioned, she's an amazing illustrator, and for the Kickstarter running now for issue 2, she actually did a print scene from the first issue. So people who backed the Kickstarter at the catch-up level, so if you buy the print issue 1 and 2, you'll get this print by Kate Baird for free. So that's definitely an awesome deal to take advantage of. And then Frank, the lettering, like you said, Frank can't pronounce his last name. That's embarrassing. Sekovic. He is an amazing letterer. I'd been following his work like way before I'd started it, or like looking for people for issue 1 for lettering. So I kind of had in the back of my mind, like I knew I wanted this guy because his work is just so good. And like you mentioned, that one page, I think it's probably the second page, where it kind of like the lettering is kind of like snaking along the page as the AI is kind of like reaching out, like asking for help, or like Bradley's making his way down the stairs,
Yeah.
freaking him out, and the AI is kind of asking for help, being like, who's there, kind of threatening him with like, my brother's a cop, he's going to find me. And yeah, just throughout that whole scene, it's just kind of snaking along, just kind of, it adds to the tempo of the scene of just making it more creepy and sinister. And Bradley's silence and the stepping of the feet that you hear, the thumps is not here that you see. Just kind of adds to that sinister atmosphere. And yeah, Frank is amazing. There's like these block letters that he does throughout the book, and Bradley is screaming. And I remember when I first saw it, I was like, wow, that's so awesome. I can't believe Frank like hand lettered those block letters. That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I wrote to him and I was like, I mentioned that, like, hey, thanks for going that extra mile and like hand lettering those block letters. It looks so cool. And he was like, nope, didn't hand letter. It's all digital, all preset. I just, he said like, yeah, I really try and have a quality of a hand lettered quality for my letters. And yeah, that really shows, I think, throughout the book.
Yeah, and just to go off of like, I guess the creepy element that's in there in the beginning, and I was reading it and he's coming down the stairs and then you see the AI and I'm like thinking that is a real person. I'm like, what kind of creepy serial killer crap that he has me reading? Like, I mean, I'm into true crime and stuff like that, so it doesn't matter to me. But I was like, what is this? And then the reveal that he's not an actual real person, that he made him sentient and stuff like that. And it kind of shifts in a way. So it's really creepy in the beginning, like this horror aspect in the beginning, and then it shifts, but it's not a complete 180. It's not like a whiplash type of thing, which is pretty cool, and good in a way that it transitions to now the AI is in like this survival mode, which I think was pretty cool too. Like it didn't have this life that it thought it did. And though I should say, even when it finds out it's not a real person, it still goes into a survival mode in a way. I think obviously people have it, but even machines have it in a way. They have some type of backup where it fights against viruses, where it fights against things that are not supposed to be there. I guess it's coded that way.
Yeah.
So it was pretty cool that even though he knows he's not real, he's still kind of behaving like a real person in a way. And even though maybe Bradley didn't think of it that way, like he wanted him to feel just so I guess he can hear him scream when he tortured him or whatever like that. But as far as like having feelings and going into survival mode, not even just as a AI, and knowing how to, I guess, learn how to survive. Because in the beginning he didn't know how to, but then when he learned, with, again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but he learns how to survive when he has to, I guess, get out in a way. So yeah, I'm rambling, but that he goes into survival mode not only as an AI, but as a person, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought about that aspect of like, yeah, computers kind of have that self-preservation mode, like they virus scans and kind of backups and all that. So yeah, that's interesting. I never thought about that. Yeah, it's kind of like coded just into its very being from the beginning.
Plus, I was just thinking about the survival mode. I was like, how cool is that he goes into survival mode, even though he doesn't really know how to do that. But I don't think any of us really know how to do that unless we're taught to, which he kind of is taught how to survive with another AI that's in there that was created by Bradley. That was like his prototype. Again, I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but just how quickly he picks up things. And again, is not just, I don't think it's just because he's an AI, but because of that human aspect that's been coded into his being.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, I guess it's a matter of opinion. Like, I can't speak from experience. Obviously, I've never been in a situation where I go into survival mode, but it seems like a very basic instinct. It's just like coded, to use that term, into our to our humanity, I guess. Just like a rabbit, if it gets foot caught in a trap, it'll gnaw it off just to escape. It just seems like something very natural for us to do, to fight or flight type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it's cool that the AI kind of goes into survival mode in issue 1, and then for issue 2, like I really wanted to kind of explore like that, okay, he survived, he's out, he's escaped Bradley. So like now what? Now he's kind of confronted with this information that he was never real. He's just a piece of hardware. But still he has like all these feelings and thoughts and that survival, that instinct to survive. So issue 2 is really about him trying to discover who he is, like what am I now that I'm kind of defied Bradley and rejected this idea that I'm just this object to be disposed of immediately. So that's kind of his character journey throughout issue 2.
So how difficult, I guess, was the world building for ID-10T era? Like, how did you manage to create a world that is totally your own, integrate any type of influences you had, but maintain that ID-10T era is yours in your world and not someone else's?
Good question. I haven't really thought about that. I mean, for the first issue, it was always meant to actually just be a one and done. I had always thought there would be no sequels or anything like that. It was the AI. It's not really a spoiler at this point because we said it, but the AI escapes at the end, and it kind of ends on open-ended a little bit, but mostly we know like he escaped, Bradley was defeated, and that's the end of the story. So yeah, once I was doing the Kickstarter for the first issue, from there, just like doing interviews and things, just naturally I kind of thought like where the story could go. And it was always my intention, like if I keep going with the story, I'm going to make it bigger, kind of in every way. So, the first issue, very claustrophobic. It really, 95% of it takes place within 2 rooms in a house. So for issue 2, I wanted to expand that scope to the entire city of Toronto. So there'll be like exploring all these different things. I wanted to add more characters, kind of more action, just overall make the whole thing bigger. So that it's just the world building kind of just naturally built itself, I guess. For issue 1, it kind of feels like the opposite of world building because it's the very, very, very small world. It's just in a basement and in Bradley's office itself. So it just had this very claustrophobic type feel, and the world itself doesn't really go far beyond just these 3 characters. So in that sense, the world building was pretty easy because it was, the world was contained to 3 rooms, 3 people, or 3 beings, I guess. To be honest, it wasn't that hard. I'm doing a comic right now where there is a lot more world building. So that's a lot more difficult, but this one, it just, all kind of came together naturally.
So do you prefer, I guess, this type of world where, it's confined to a certain space and it can only go this way, that way? Or how are you finding working on this other project where the world is, it has its own laws and status quo and whatever else it may be that you have to kind of know, like lore in a way that you have to know in order to, I guess, write these other characters in the setting? So how is that working out compared to this one?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, just to go into a little bit about this other thing I'm working on, what is it called? Can't remember the name. It's called A Journey into the Abyss. And it's another comic I'm doing with an artist based in Winnipeg. She's called Marissa Mayhew. I'm excited about this one. It's basically a sequel to A Trip to the Moon. So if you don't know the name, you probably have seen it at one point in your life. It's a silent film made by French filmmaker Georges Méliès, kind of at the turn of the century. And the most famous shot from it is the person, the man in the moon, where it's like a moon and dude's face is in it, and then the rocket gets shot into his eye. So it's basically a sequel to that. It's kind of within the world of Georges Méliès's films. So he made hundreds and hundreds of films within his career, and they're all kind of like these really cool trick films. They were kind of pioneering special effects at the time. He was the kind of Michael Bay of his time, where he created these like mind-blowing special effects. So yeah, it's in a world like that. So I guess with that, I have a little bit of help because it's kind of going off of the world he created. It's just me kind of expanding upon it and kind of connecting the dots, making it all fit together into a cohesive thing. So yeah, that's been a lot of fun. I don't think about it too much, to be honest. I kind of just make it up as I go along. As I focus on the story first and the characters, and then kind of veer off into world building stuff as I go along. Yeah.
So what advice would you offer or could you offer to other creators that you wish someone would have told you when you first started?
Well, in terms of like,
it can be when you've just started doing your own solo projects. It can be when you started working with other people. It could be just maybe even, oh, I wish someone would have told me to do this when I started looking for collaborators, or even trying to fund my projects.
Yeah. To be honest, I think the hardest part of making comics is getting people to read your comics. So I would love some more advice about that. Just like how to market your book, get the word out there, kind of build an audience. There's so much you can do. Like, one thing that I wish I'd done for the last Kickstarter and this Kickstarter is start a newsletter, just so you can kind of just naturally build your audience. You get all these emails, and you can blast it out to your email list when you're doing the pre-launch page or when the Kickstarter immediately launches, and you just kind of get that groundswell at the very beginning. Just like the hustle of marketing your book, like reaching out to podcasts like I'm doing right now. That's really, really important to kind of get your story in front of people that are kind of outside your friend circle, or even your kind of Twitter sphere circle, just reaching new people. I'm still learning more about the whole marketing and PR aspect of Kickstarter, of making comics, which, I should probably learn more. My day job is actually marketing, so there's still so much to learn. In terms of writing, I guess, get an editor. And if you can't hire an editor, get, friends or nice people who are up for reading your comic, and get eyes on it as soon as you can. Especially when you're doing your first draft, or when you finished your draft and you think it's perfect. That's when you send it out, and people will, I prefer it when like people point out flaws in it and have a lot of critical feedback, over than send it back to me. It's like, oh, it was great. I really want to like get into the nitty gritty and see like what I made, what can be improved, things like that. So those are my, I guess, two big advice: get an editor, or at least get friends to give you feedback, and learn how to market your book. Do what you can there.
So throughout this whole process, do you or did you ever get overwhelmed with anything? Like, did it ever become too much? Like, and if it ever has, how do you typically manage your mental well-being?
Drugs help. Antidepressants are really useful. But to be serious, I you know what? I'm a little bit at an advantage. I'm just a very calm person overall, so I don't really get overwhelmed too easily. I usually get really overwhelmed about little nitty gritty things that don't matter, instead of like the big picture stuff. So I remember like I was really concerned when I did the first Kickstarter and I was ready to send it out, just like getting really concerned about like, oh my God, how am I gonna send out the digital copy? Like I didn't know, like I did, this sounds weird, but I didn't know a lot about like Dropbox and the Google Drive or whatever like that. So I didn't know how to like send it out. And I was just like worrying about all these things, like, oh my God, if people don't get it, if it bounces back, so they can't download it, getting really in my head about that. Um, yeah, now I lost the track of your question. How do I manage the
Yeah, how do you manage your mental well-being when it does become too much, if it ever has become too much?
mm, yeah, for me, I think just being so extra super duper prepared. Like for the first Kickstarter, I launched it in the middle of a pandemic, and it was my first Kickstarter, and I'd never printed a book before, I'd never self-published before, so I was like, I'm going to take a baby step here and just do a digital version of it and have a very, very modest goal of 1,200 Canadian. So yeah, I just didn't want to stress myself out like that. So it was a very manageable goal to kind of promote, and then I didn't have to worry anything about like printing during the pandemic or shipping during the pandemic. I mean, we're still in a pandemic, but I've kind of again done my homework. So did a lot of research about how to print, how to prep the files. I found a printer that's in Toronto that's a really, really great, and they helped me like a ton. Um, you know, researched ways, found an organization here in Canada called Chit Chats that helps with shipping, which just reduces the cost, makes it a lot more streamlined. So yeah, doing your homework way ahead of time so there's not any surprises down the road is a great way to kind of keep me calm and grounded. Um, yeah, that's it. I mean, I have a lot of other stressors. Like I got a full-time job, I got two children, two infant children that I have to take care of as well. So, yeah, that's stressful, but you got to do what you got to do.
Well, I guess to add on to that, I guess, has there ever been a time where you felt like you had to put it aside to take care of business, as far as with your family and with your job, with your full-time job? Because a lot of people who listen to the show who are also independent creators, they have a full-time job and they have a family and they have a household and everything else to take care of, as well as pursuing their dreams.
Mhm.
So it's like it becomes overwhelming. That's why I asked that question with a lot of people, because they're in a similar predicament as you, or have the same, I guess, life as you, with a job and family, and they're pursuing their dream. So I asked, how do they manage their mental well-being
Yeah.
when it becomes too much in a way?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I just kind of try to mitigate all that stuff. So, like I said, just starting way ahead of time.
mhm.
So I just have that breathing space to kind of figure things out or to get the Kickstarter prepped. So I don't have to spend, enormous amounts of time during my day. I can just take an hour during my lunch or, maybe an hour at night once the kids are asleep to work on it over like several weeks or several months. So, you know, doing that, there's plenty of time. Yeah, I mean, today, like I took the day off work so I could just focus on the Kickstarter and get all that nitty gritty stuff done of like promoting it through Twitter and kind of getting in contact with news outlets, stuff like that. So it took that time for myself just to work. I guess there's also the financial commitment of it all because to do the Kickstarter, I had to produce 10 pages of comics before it even launched. So yeah, I sold a big chunk of my comic collection. So instead of using my own money, which I need to pay my mortgage and pay daycare and
Mhm.
groceries, all that stuff, couldn't do that. So yeah, I sold some of my I don't know my precious comic collection to fund, and yeah, surprise, I actually did pretty well. Um, who knew my Spawn comics from the early 2000s would be like this little mini gold mine that I was sitting on? I had no idea, but I got a lot of money from that. Like, you wouldn't believe how much. That was kind of
Well,
surprising.
well, yeah, that's a good thing. I mean, sad you had to part with it, but you found something else that you're more passionate about, and you'll be.
I can let go of my, I don't know, Todd McFarlane collection.
But my last question for you, Matt, is what is your idea of success? So I ask that because as creators, if we're not getting regular paychecks from a full-time job or making consistent revenue from our art, we're considered failures, or we'll consider ourselves failures.
Mhm.
Many of us will put our dreams and projects on the back burner or give them up altogether because this career path can be highly intimidating and competitive. So what is your idea of quote unquote success?
Yeah. This is something I talked a lot about with my therapist when I was putting out the first one. Excuse me. I think like I kind of had to make peace with myself and come to the realization that, maybe for my first comic, one that's released just digitally, it wasn't going to set the world on fire. So I kind of had to temper expectations. And if, you know, it's always nice if I get compliments as soon as it comes out, or people buy it right away on Gumroad after it was released, or say nice things or review it, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, I really had to come to peace with the fact that like I love this book so much, and it's exactly the book that I wanted to make. Like it's the story I wanted to tell. It conveyed the themes I wanted to convey. It looked like the book that I wanted to make. So I like flabbergasted, so impressed with the artwork that everybody put together on it. Like Tavio, Frank, K. That looks great. So yeah, just being really happy with the product that I made, and made with other people, but kind of brought this team together to make. Yeah, it's something that would not have existed had I not come up with the idea, kind of project managed the whole thing, the creative team. It's kind of like the cheerleader and the person, pushing the project forward the whole time. So yeah, that's what I would say. If you're not, you're probably not going to make a ton of money off of it. If you know, if you can break even, that's amazing. But I think just being really happy with the the story that you told and the way that you told it is yeah, you have to take solace in that and really find comfort in it. And I guess that was, to be mushy, my idea of success in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything else that you want to touch on about ID-10T era as a whole that I may have missed? Maybe discuss rewards for potential backers. I know you discussed one already with Kay with the print, if they get the print issues of 1 and 2. But is there
Mm-hmm.
anything else that would you feel like would be interesting for potential backers?
Sure. Let's see. So yeah, you can get just digital version of issue 2. You can get a digital version of issues 1 and 2. Like I said, you can get the print issue 1 and 2 and get that free print from K. We're also offering a book bundle, so you can. I mentioned 2 anthologies as a part of, so you can get issues 1 and 2, and a print version of Gothic Tales of Haunted Future, and another anthology that I was in a couple of years ago called Caged in Flesh, which is a Jekyll and Hyde anthology. So I have a story in that. We're offering a chance to appear in the comic, so Ottavio will actually draw you in the comic itself. So as I speak right now, there's 5 spots for that reward, and 2 people have taken them. So if you go to the Kickstarter page, you can see like examples that Tevye did last time, and he did a really good job. Like he did a perfect, I don't know, drawing of the people that backed that. Let me get this. You can also get original pages from issue 1. So you can see right here, they're drawn on A4 paper, and they look really super cool. So we got, I think, 10 left of those. So you can grab one of those. So it's still available. And the last kind of big thing we're offering is Ottavio is doing a limited amount of commissions. So you can get commission from him drawn in pencil and ink on A4 paper. And yeah, and that's pretty much it. And yeah, it's It started today, which is April 19th, and it runs until May 19th. So there's a month to back it. Our goal is 7,500 Canadian. And yeah, I think we're offering pretty good shipping rates like around the world. Like if you're in Canada, it's just $6 Canadian, which I don't know, is pretty good, I think. And then for the United States, it's $10 Canadian, which again I think is pretty reasonable amount.
Yeah, that's not bad. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's pretty good.
All right. Well, again, I want to thank a comics writer and creator of the ID-10T era comic series, Matt McGrath, for joining us here to promote the Kickstarter for his second issue that's now live. I highly recommend our listeners to consider backing ID-10T era and/or purchase the first issue if they can. All of Matt's socials and Kickstarter will be listed in this episode's details for those who are interested. Again, I'm K.S. Garner, and you have been listening to the Solo Nerdbird podcast. Thank you.
Bye.